Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is David Ewing, Nashville, a historian. We're talking about Black History Month and other issues around that area as well. David, you mentioned that you think there needs to be more taught about African-American history in schools, particularly in the local schools. Nashville has quite a history in the civil rights movement. Do you think it's taught much at all in the schools?
I think it is. You know, our school board, I think, has encouraged, schools to speak about local history. I speak at many schools during Black History Month and other times of the year about the stories of the civil rights movement, the suffrage movement, and other interesting Nashville items.
Now, there was the lunch counter sit-in here that was one of the first in the nation that actually led to desegregating the lunch counters downtown. A lot of those people that were involved are passing on. One of those is John Lewis, who was here in Nashville, one of the leaders of that when he was a very young college student. He later became a congressman in Georgia, came back to Nashville several times, was honored by the city, including naming a street for him. Now, that's a pretty big honor, considering that you're naming one right in the middle of downtown Nashville.
And so a long street starts at Jefferson Street and goes all the way past the city cemetery. So, yes, and in our business district, the Ryman has a John Lewis Way address, and so does the Music City Center and the Bridgestone Arena.
And also the AfricanAmerican Museum is there too, so there's a lot of things along there that are significant for Nashville and significant in African-American history.
Yes.
Another one that was also here is Diane Nash. She was another young leader in that. She had not been getting much recognition in Nashville. The council is now going to name the steps in front of the courthouse in that plaza area, not the park, but those areas out front of the courthouse, in her honor. Has she not sought out much recognition? She seems to have been rather shy about doing that. She's been back here some, but she has not been touted. Is there a concern perhaps that this has something to do with gender?
No, I think it's just honoring people. Diane Nash didn't get the due that John Lewis got because John Lewis went to Congress and was this kind of national figure. And after Diane Nash left here, she did things, but it wasn't at such a national level as John Lewis. And it's very important for us to kind of recognize people while they're living and have this great honor.
People might say, well, John Lewis gets a whole street named after him. Diane Nash gets something out in front of the courthouse. But those steps in front of the courthouse, that plaza, was very significant to her and very significant to the entire sit-in movement.
Yeah, one of the more significant days in Nashville history was April 19th, 1960. At 5 in the morning, Z. Alexander Luby's house, the lawyer for the students of the sit-in, was bombed across from Meharry and Fisk. And by that afternoon, 4,000 people, led by Diane Nash and John Lewis, marched to City Hall. And outside the courthouse, on the plaza that's named for Diane Nash now, the young Fisk student asked Ben West famously, was segregation at the lunch counters right? And Mayor West, looking at Diane Nash and 4,000 students, said it wasn't right. And that's when the segregation ended at the lunch counters on Fifth Avenue, now John Lewis.
Another major leader of the lunch counter sit-in was, in fact, one of the adult leaders who trained the students was the Rev James Lawson, who was at Vanderbilt University at the time, although he lost his job over this. He too now is being individually honored by the Metro School Board. They're naming the new high school in Bellevue in his honor. Do people in Bellevue understand the name of the person that's going to be on this high school for them?
They probably don't, but this is a teaching opportunity so we could raise up a name. In the old days, Pat, we used to name our high schools after great Nashvillians, Julia Green, Tom Joy. We've gotten away from that. We have generic names like Cane Ridge on schools, and I think it's great that we're putting, significant people's names on these schools.
The civil rights movement in Nashville had a lot of people that were involved in those lunch counter sit-ins. They were also some later involved in the Freedom Riders across the South to desegregate the bus system throughout this area. They're all passing away. Do we need a general monument to recognize all those people? Because this was not just 4 or 5 people. There were a lot of people involved in this.
There were. Zolfat and the Metro Council is leading the effort. There's a new bus station that's going to be built kind of on Clarksville Highway near Bordeaux, and that's going to be hopefully named for Rip Patton. But yes, we are a society of tourists and Instagram, and we need some reminder of the sacrifice that all these students made.
Over the last couple of years, we've had a number of these folks that were still with us that have now passed away. Kwame Lillard, Rip Patton, and some others to be on the program. did the oral histories they leave behind, are they still with us? Did we capture them on tape so that we know their individual stories and what was involved? Because there's some pretty harrowing experiences they went through.
Yeah, some we did. I'm on the board of the Conservancy of Centennial Park, and Kwame was one of the people that was attempting to integrate the swimming pools, which were segregated at the time, and we had a symposium where he got to speak and talk about, that day where he was out there. And
on the swimming pools, the city closed them and never opened them back up again, in the old city of Nashville.
Yeah, the city closed their swimming pools as opposed to integrate them. They filled them up with concrete, and so, we had these kind of private swim and tennis clubs that kind of popped up after that.
One place people in Nashville can learn more about what's going on in the civil rights movement in Nashville is the civil rights room in the downtown public library. It's a beautiful facility. Tell us what people will find there.
Through the generosity of Bill and Robin King, we have this wonderful interactive facility that opened 20 years ago. It is a room that has photographs, there's videos from the civil rights movement and documentaries, there's quotes of John Lewis and Dr. King, and it's just in a timeline on a mock lunch counter. It's just a great place where you could learn more about the sacrifice and what really happened in the 1960s here.
Also, we've talked before about the AfricanAmerican Museum that's down there for music. That's a very important contribution to this city. We have a lot to tell about that, and during the month of February, they're offering some free admission days, so people still got time during the month of February. They go down and see it for free.
Every Wednesday, it's free. So I would encourage you, if you haven't been down there yet, or if you want to go back, go down and see this wonderful new museum. Another place that you can go for more African American history that relates back to the Civil War is Fort Negley. That was literally a fort. It's out there where the old Sounds ballpark used to be on Chestnut Avenue. Tell people what you can find there and why that's important for them to learn about what was, because African Americans actually built that fort. Yes, including one of my relatives. My great-great-grandfather's twin brother, Taylor G. Ewing, escaped from Travelers Rest and came to Nashville in 1862 and was one of the many hundreds of African Americans that helped build that fort. Under Mayor Bill Purcell, the city spent $5 million on that fort to restore it, and there's a visitor center that has some history on the wall and other programs that go on. Now, this is all just not to feel good about ourselves or to go back and learn more about our history. There is a growing amount of tourism built around African Americans who want to go and learn about their history, whether it's what's happened during the Civil Rights Movement, what happened back in the Civil War. How much is that growing here in Nashville? It's a huge industry. I give tours here in Nashville, and people visit all the time that have come from Memphis or Birmingham or Selma, and they want to kind of retrace John Lewis's steps here. And so they're very interested in kind of the movement here, the sites here, and really what made Nashville unique. And Nashville also has, perhaps as much as any city, has more African American higher institutes of higher education. I mean, we have a large number of them compared to a lot of cities have one or two, but we have 3 or 4. We have 4. We have American Baptist College, Fisk University, Tennessee State, and Meharry Medical College, and that has created a lot of interesting Black history here, and we get to tell the stories of Black history too. As we began the Black History Month here in this country, we had a whole rash of bomb threats that went out to those African American colleges. Is that kind of discouraging? I mean, do you think it was definitely something that was motivated to try to push back on some of the things that are going on in the country that they don't like? They want to try to stop the rising interest and support for African Americans? Right, it's rather unfortunate, but sadly nothing new for the African American community. We've always had bomb threats and things like that. Nashville historian David Ewing is our guest on Inside Politics. Back to continue more of our discussion after this break.